Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And today I'd like to start this podcast recognizing the life of Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away last week. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Buddhist monk, a teacher, a peace activist, who taught so many of us how to live more in the present and find greater peace within our hearts. Years ago, I read this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh about uncertainty. People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. And in the last 6 months, this has become very apparent to me in my own life. I never thought about the concept that we actually prefer suffering that is familiar to us. I know I talk about it often, but my husband left me over 3.5 years ago. And yes, there's been a path to process pain, but I've noticed lately that I've gotten very used to aspects of my suffering. There's an aspect of the story of the fact that my husband left me, the conversations I could have with my friends, the nights I don't go out, the coziness of knowing how I feel and how my life is. And it's not a conscious thing. It's not that I like any of this suffering, but it's suffering that I know. It's a life I know how to live. And although this might sound surprising to you, a lot of us do this. Sometimes someone will lose a job, and that will be the story of why their life didn't work out. And that'll be the story that they tell people, and that'll be the reason they don't go back to school or they don't try for a bigger job or a better job. Because we don't want to take that risk. We don't want to have the experience of getting fired again. We don't want to start a new business. And then all the people in our lives gather around us and they listen to our stories, and it's comfortable and it's supportive. But it's the suffering we know, because if we branched out, if we changed, if we did something bigger, if we did something better, we'd have to endure uncertainty. And our fear of uncertainty is so great that we'd rather choose suffering we know than possibly suffering we've never experienced before. We also do this with relationships. We don't enter into new relationships. We'd rather be alone than to get hurt again. We don't start businesses because we'd rather live in regret. We'd rather live in a job we don't like that we know than take a risk and possibly lose and possibly things not working out. In a way, we're always measuring how much suffering we're willing to endure for the sake of certainty, for the sake of knowing. So it's not just about, if we're afraid of uncertainty, we won't take chances. If we're afraid of uncertainty, we will actually choose suffering in our lives because we don't know the risk we're going to take next if it's going to lead to suffering. It could be wonderful, it could be fabulous. But that fear of uncertainty causes us to live smaller or to stay in a place of pain. And when I realized this, that there were aspects of my healing that I was not totally working on because I had a routine, it felt comfortable. I knew the suffering, I knew how it would feel, I knew how I could numb it, I knew how I can get out of it. And when I equated it to not moving forward, not taking risks, not going out, not starting new projects, not doing things that are new, I realized that I had found a new fear of the unknown. It was choosing the suffering I knew over the potential if I choose something different. And when you start to look at this, you start to see how your need for certainty holds you back. And when I really started to look at this, I realized that this was one of the last pieces that stood between myself and freedom. Because we don't choose freedom when we're afraid of the unknown. We limit ourselves for whatever reason. Thich Nhat Hanh also wrote, "Letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free." And so the path to freedom, again, is allowing yourself to have a different relationship with uncertainty and not choosing things that are comfortable, not sitting in our stories of broken relationships and lost jobs and businesses that didn't work out. Looking at, are we getting comfort from the thing that didn't work out? Is it easier to not try and to sit home and watch TV and avoid our dreams, avoid the things we truly want in our lives? Because that would force us to endure uncertainty, new things, possibly new hurts, new disappointments. We forget it could also lead to joys and miracles and openings and new businesses. But when we fear the unknown, we look at anything different as potential suffering. We think what we don't know is too hard to handle. It's too stressful. It's too risky. And even if the moment is giving us pain, we choose that instead of the thing we desire the most. And I've spent a lot of time refusing to sit in familiar suffering. I don't want to look back in my life and say, it was too hard to move forward. It was too hard to have a new relationship. It was too hard to launch those classes. It was just too hard for me to do these things. So I chose a job I didn't like. I didn't finish the project. I never went on another date. I don't want to choose comfort, which comes with suffering, which comes with old, which comes with the past, which comes with clinging, over choosing potential, dreams, expansion, happiness, joy, and most of all, freedom. Freedom from the past, freedom from the suffering, freedom from the fear of what I don't know. And I know you probably have some story in your life, some experience, some suffering that you're choosing because you're afraid of the unknown. Maybe you're staying at a job you don't love, and you stay there because it's suffering that you know. Maybe you stay in a relationship because you can't think you could do better. Or you don't get back into a new relationship because the pain you had from the last one, it's better to know that and to be with that than to take the risk to love again. Maybe you don't start that new business because you can't bear being disappointed again. You don't go back to school because you're afraid you can't handle it. You don't buy that house. You don't make that investment. You just stay with what you know, even though it doesn't make you happy. It doesn't give you joy and you don't feel peaceful because it feels certain. There's no reason to choose suffering that we know when we could let go and be free. When we could let go and have new experiences, let go and be creative and innovative. And the truth is, if you're hurt enough and you keep going back out there, you realize you could survive the pain. But it's much harder to survive a life without meaning. And it's much harder to survive a life where you didn't pursue your dreams. Because that life is filled with hurt and regret and suffering. When we could liberate ourselves, and we liberate ourselves when we're not afraid of what we don't know. But we have to be willing to get out of that comfort, that feeling of what I know is better than what I don't know. When there is so much potential there for you, but you just had to step out into the unknown. And when we have intentions and we have dreams and we have plans and we collaborate, we take step by step. And each day, our passion and our drive will light the way with so much meaning and so much delight and so much joy, and find that freedom to pursue the life we've always dreamed of. So I hope you'll think about these ideas when you feel scared to move forward, when you settle for less, when you're not pursuing your dreams, when you're holding on because you think that certainty will give you the life that you want. I hope you remember that level of suffering that you're accepting because you're afraid to dream, because dreams come with uncertainty. I hope you look at your relationship with uncertainty, and I hope you start to see it as a place of infinite possibilities, where your life changes, where your suffering ends, and where you can be free to be happy. You have what it takes to create a beautiful, wonderful life. We don't need to choose less. We don't need to choose suffering. We just have to remember that each moment offers us something new. And life always has maybe. And it's even possible that maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my book, The Gift of Maybe, or A Year Without Men, they're available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you can subscribe and leave a comment.